I'm going to show you our mixer that we use at church, and currently we're using the mixer that is the Allen Heath GL2200. It's not a new board in any way, but it's a great classic board that just has great options for us. It's a 32 channel board. It's probably more than we need, but it's better to have more. So just to give you, this thing can look very overwhelming, but all you need to know is that this is a channel section, which is repeated 32 times. And then we have a middle control section that's just repeated once. So basically you just have one section and two sections that you need to learn because it's just multiplied. So let's start at the top. Let me tell you about the channel. We have a 48 volt button here. This is called phantom power, and it's only used or necessary for microphones that need phantom power, which would be a condenser mic. Currently in our church we're using 3 mics that require this, and those 3 mics are the mic that goes inside the piano. The other mic that needs it is, we're just added a drum overhead mic, and the last mic that we would need it is our good old pulpit mic. So if the mic's not working and you're turning everything up, it might be that if you follow all the way up, you might realize that the button's not pressed in. So make sure 48 volts is pressed in. If it doesn't require it, then you don't need it. Okay. Next we have a phase button, which we do not typically need unless we're doing some complicated miking where we're doing mics next to each other. Sometimes there's a thing called cancellation that happens. Typically we don't need it, so just leave it in up position. The next button is the what we call the line pad button. If you're using a microphone, go ahead and leave it in the up position. If for some reason, for example over here, we're using it for the iPad or iPhone, that button needs to be in the in position. Okay. The next we have our gain control. Our gain control is kind of like our master level that we use to make sure how much power do we want to give this channel, what's going to be our maximum rate that we want to give it, so that when we move this big fader, how is this going to be affected? So we set that first. It's a very important thing. Next is a high pass filter. The high pass filter is set at 100 hertz. And what that basically means, high pass means things get to go through. It can also be a low cut, is what it's called sometimes. It's basically saying frequencies that are in the 100 hertz and lower do not pass. Okay? So for the most of the stuff we do, it's okay if we're using it for voice to go ahead and push those in. Sometimes it helps us with mic handling noise. It's, again, our system is, we're not running subwoofers, but for voices it's fine. For instruments like the bass and the guitar, I'm going to go ahead and leave them out. I like to make sure that those frequencies are passed through. Next we have a 4-band EQ. It's a really powerful EQ. I love it. We have a high, we have a sweepable mid, we have a sweepable low mid, and then we have a low frequency. These are not affected unless this button's pushed in. So if I move all these and this button is not pushed in, it makes no effect. We'll get into EQ a little bit later. We have, next we have 6 auxiliaries. In our auxiliaries, we have 1, 2, and 3, and 4 that are used for our monitor sends. Monitor 1 is for Anna Damaris. Monitor 2 is for Levi and Jared. Monitor 3 is going to be for me and a drummer. Monitor 4 is still open. We also have a button that says pre or post. Pre-fader means that if I put this in, my sound is not affected by the fader. Okay? I can move the fader up. It's going to still go to whatever level I set it here. If I leave it up, that means no matter what level I set it here, this is going to be kind of the one that determines what is going to be sent to those monitors. So for the most part, what we use, pre-fader is probably the preferred method that we're going to use here, because we want the mics to always be, the singers to always make sure they hear what they need to hear, and the fader becomes what we need to hear for the church audience. Auxiliaries 5 and 6, again, we're going to leave in the pre-fader mode because we do not need to, well, actually we're going to leave them in the up position. Auxiliaries 5 and 6 are going to be sent to a special channel. The next part that we have in our mixer is the pan. Pan is not really used in our setting unless we get into some groupings, but we're not running a stereo system. Mute. If this button is red, nothing will come out of it unless pre-fader is pushed in. The next button we have is the pre-fader listen, the PFL. We'll get into that in a little bit. We also have some subgroup buttons. At this point, we're sending all our channels to the left and right. And you'll notice I've also indented 3 and 4 because 3 and 4 are going to be sent to a special channel over here on this section. Again, that's going to be used to help us do our recording. So again, this is our mixer, and that was a brief introduction to what's happening there. In the next video, we'll get a little bit more detailed.